It's freezing in England. Oh my goodness. You guys, if you're from England, I love you, but your weather is shit. Hey everyone. Welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at JustinoTweets and at SheKnowsArsenal. Welcome to another episode. Sorry you guys did not catch me after the Southampton game. I did the football terrace, and after that, I was just like, my brain is just not in any sort of place to be sitting here for another hour and a half talking about things that I knew we would talk about today. And I wanted to kind of see how the weekend unfolded and stuff like that. And then kind of talk about things like once my head had kind of cleared, because my head was on Pluto after that game. I could not believe what I had just seen. You know what I mean? And when a team comes back from 3-1 down, usually you're like, okay, well, at least we salvaged a point. But I mean, was it really salvaging a point? It's Southampton, bottom of the league. For large parts of that game, I felt like Southampton was pretty comfortable and bossing our midfield, and it was a tough watch. We didn't really start playing until like the 85th minute. The fans had also left, which, in most circumstances, I think you could be like, oh, well, the team's not playing good, so it makes sense to leave. But at the same time, after, everything that we've seen this season, I am a little bit surprised that people that were in the stands just decided to go. I found that to be a little bit like, damn. And I also think that the fans, like, also we have like a separate conversation like beyond Arteta and the team and how they can do a better job. I also think from a fan standpoint, when your team is in the middle of a title race, as disappointed as you are with the last couple of results, like kind of the last thing you want to do at home is like vacate the premises when the team is like desperately needing you. I think the team is in desperate need of the 12th man, and we didn't really get it. And so I'm not saying it's their fault, but I am saying that maybe we're a little fickle. We're there when it's sunshine and rainbows, but once shit hit the fan, and this is the first time this season where the shit is genuinely hitting the fan, we just kind of vacate. Like, we're just like, I don't want nothing to do with this anymore. I know it was 3-1, but like, still, we're in the middle of a title race. Like, it's crazy. And we've seen a lot of it manifest online as well. And it's not just fans in the stands. It's like online, everyone, not everyone, but like there's a lot of like 1 minute we love this team and the next minute like we can't stand them. And so I do think that Arsenal fans, like, we have to look at ourselves as well and be like, maybe we shouldn't build up the team so much just to kind of shit on them when things aren't going right. I feel like, that is just not the way that we should be. But we'll talk about that as well. But after Southampton, for me, I just needed like to just get my head back together, because it did feel like the end of the title race. Like, we needed to give ourselves a little bit of a buffer, and we literally have made it so that we have to beat Manchester City away from home in order to salvage any sort of like lifeline, which feels very similar to last season, where we had those games of like Brighton and Southampton and Crystal Palace to give ourselves a buffer over Tottenham, and then we left it so that we had to go to Tottenham and Newcastle with injuries and win those games. And so it just feels all very reminiscent. So I understand that there's trauma and PTSD from last season that's kind of contributing to a lot of this anxiety. But being that we've went through it last season, I do feel like the team, the manager, and the fans should be able to act accordingly. Do you know what I mean? It's not that we don't have any choices whatsoever. I do kind of push back on this idea that like, Arteta's backed into a corner into just using holding. Against Southampton, to me, it felt very obvious that there was like a level of anxiety and nervousness. And you can say, well, it's just the title race, but we've been in stressful, games before. And I felt like we dealt with them so much better. We were at home against Southampton. Like, there's no reason to give away a goal in the first minute, but we did it anyway. And there was confusion at the back amongst like Thomas Partey, Ramsdale, Zinchenko, because they're trying to figure out how to build from the back and like not let it touch Holding's toe. And I just feel like when you have players in the team that kind of give off that anxiety, or like other players around them don't trust them, you have to like either eliminate that person from the group, or from the situation, save everybody from that in itself, or you have to change the tactics in order to limit their flaws. And quite frankly, the only way to do that with Rob Holding is to hide him in a back three and play a more pragmatic style. Arteta is unwilling to play that way. We still try to build and play our way, but you can't do that with Rob Holding. And so just avoiding him in build up is not going to work. There has to be something a little bit more intricate, a little bit more, I think, cute done with what we're trying to, kind of, we need a little bit more cuteness around how we're going to strategically move around having Holding in the team. And it needs to either be the back three / back five, or you take him out. It's just, I'm not really in that. I cannot accept that Arteta has no choices, nothing. This is it. Because Tomiyasu is not there and Saliba's not there, he has to use Holding in this way. I don't believe it, quite frankly. I just don't. And so, as somebody that is Arteta in, loves Arteta, thinks he's taking us in the right direction, I also feel like, the end of the season, crunch time, the run-in, is a time where you really get to see what your manager is really about and where they genuinely need to improve. Because it's all fine and well getting us up to this point, but kind of like last season, there needed to be some protection, some tactical shift, something in order to give us over the line. We're not going to have Goldilocks scenario every single time we go into the run-in. There's going to be a key player missing. There's going to be bumps in the road. We're going to be chased by a really strong team, and we have to be able to adapt. And I am finding that, Arteta is kind of doing the same thing that he did last season, kind of give him a pass. It was the injuries, it was this, it was that. But when you come into the next season and we're doing the same thing and we're pretending as though there's no choice, that's where I kind of just feel like it's like an overprotection of Mikel Arteta. We don't need to be precious. You can like Mikel Arteta, think he's doing the right things, but also remember he's a new manager and he probably doesn't have a grip on this part of the game, in-game management, the tactical part of shifting things around when you don't have your best possible 11, and also managing the gray areas of the squad. So if you need to use a Kieran Tierney, you can, and he can actually have an impact. I do find that like you want to use players that sometimes are not, like Pep does this really well. And of course, like his players are like world class and all that kind of stuff, but players can be out for a significant amount of time, not really like big members of the squad, but when they're called upon like halfway through the season or in crunch time, they always perform. And I do find that like the gray areas of our squad, players that have talent but don't get called on quite a bit, they seem like they're out in the cold. And then when we try to use them, they're not really like up to speed. They don't really seem to make a difference. And I do find like that to be something that we said last season. So we're still learning about Mikel Arteta. He is not exempt from criticism. But also criticism doesn't mean that I want the manager sacked, so it's a really, really difficult one, and I know this is a little bit of a rant, but this is kind of all the things that have been in my head over the last couple of days. And, I just think that like, we have choices, whether we use them or not is up to the manager. And this going to the Etihad with Rob Holding feels like suicide for me. It just really does. It feels like a concession. So obviously, if you've been under a rock, David Ornstein had dropped a bomb this morning, basically a bomb that I think most of us already knew, is that Saliba is probably out for the season and he's not going to make it for Man City or Chelsea. Shock. But I do think that there were some Arsenal fans that were holding out hope that we were just kind of like managing him for this big game. I get you need all the copium and hopium in the world to get through this title race, right? But he's not going to be available. And so there's a lot of doom and gloom. There's a lot of reaction. There's a lot of narrative. All the, basically High Standards FC and Top Gooners are all fighting against each other. And it's just chaos. And so from the perspective of the show, I guess we can just have a conversation about how we're feeling about things. No echo chambers. If you're pissed off, be pissed off. If you're, feeling good about the season because of where we came from, that's fine as well. But in regards to Wednesday, there seems like there's like no hope in the fan base whatsoever. And I wonder if we were like any other fan base, like even with one injury, one key injury, if we were any other team, Newcastle, Man United, whatever, would it be this like forgone? Like, would it be this end of the road? Would it be this? Because when you take yourself out of your emotions and kind of think about what we're going into, what we're asking the team to do is have like their cup final, to have their best game of the season, to try to do the impossible. And if I was one of the players and people expected me to do the impossible, but then I look online and nobody thinks we can, I wonder what that does to the psyche of the players. Is it like just go in there and just flop it, And I do think that we should have more of a positive outlook on things, not in terms of like, we could still think that maybe we won't get the 3 points. There's a very big possibility that we won't get the 3 points. But do we not think that the team can show up and put in a really good performance and really go for it? I think that they can, but the fans don't seem to think that this team has anything in it whatsoever. And I think that that's a little bit distressing considering how high of a pedestal we put this team on. It's like 1 minute they're the best thing and we love them to death. The next minute we don't think that they'll show up at all against Manchester City and it's just going to be a blowout. It's crazy. We could be so fickle and flip-floppy, and I just feel like if we were, say we're Newcastle and they were missing Botman or whatever player, let's say Bruno Guimaraes, a player that is very, important to the structure of their team. Would their fans be like us? Would the doom and gloom be to this level? I don't know that it would. I don't know if they would. And that scares me a little bit because it's just like, did we actually believe in this team or did we not? So yeah, it's wild, but those are kind of the thoughts going in my head. Dab says Botman and the guy that would replace him. Hightower says our football doesn't work as well when we don't have the players. So yes, if it were Newcastle, losing one player may not be the end of the world. In the way we play, we need quality in every position. I mean, every team has players where, I think Man City is pretty much the only team in the league that's exempt from having, I think they only have one player that if that player was not available, they would probably not perform very well, and that'd be Rodri. They can pretty much replicate the levels to some extent, in every other position. So I find it a little bit like, Newcastle don't have the greatest bench. If they were missing Bruno Guimaraes, they don't have. Do you really think Longstaff is going to be able to replicate what Bruno Guimaraes can do, or Murphy, or any of these players? No. It doesn't happen like that. Even Manchester United, we saw like the way that they performed against Sevilla with Harry Maguire, that was mitigated by removing him from the squad and playing a left back and Lindelof in their center backs, but they can't play the same way with them as they play with Lisandro Martinez. Like, Arsenal are not the only team in the world that have to have their best 11 available to compete, and so I am finding this a little bit more like, should we expect the team to still be able to perform without Saliba? Absolutely. Are there, is there some complications? Absolutely. But should we be like, should it be this bad? Because I speak to rivals every day, and even though they're not quite on board with the idea that we're going to go to Etihad and get any points, they are shocked to the level in which Arsenal fans feel no sort of confidence in their team whatsoever. And even though Arteta has to take some of this and figure out tactics in order to make us more solid and things like that, and Holding is not the best player, and so there are going to be he's going to affect us to some extent. He does affect us. I do agree with that. but also the players around him need to step up. You know, you have to try to absorb a player that's not that great. You know, players like Ben White, who's been put on a pedestal, Gabrielle put on a pedestal, Thomas Partey. Those are the players that are immediately in this guy's vicinity that and Ramsdale, they all need to step up and try to absorb this guy. We should not be getting blown out at the Etihad on Wednesday. Based on the team that we have and the level in which we've played this season, we should not be getting blown out. If we get blown out, it's not because we have Rob Holding. It's going to be mentality for me. I expect our levels not to be as high as they were prior to Saliba's injury. But if we go there and get our pants pulled down, it's because we didn't have it enough up here and the players didn't show up, you know? And I expect the team that I've seen all season to step up and put in a decent performance against Manchester City for the title race. You know, it's wild. Amir says our defense saved us a few times when we didn't have our starting attack. Our attack had more than enough chances last few games to help the defense, but didn't drop off expected. It's not all on Holding. It definitely is not all on Holding. You know, I do think my point about Holding is that I feel like we need to make changes in order to absorb him. Those changes being tactically, formation, personnel, and also the players around him stepping up and not going into the woe is me because I have to play with Holding is stepping up. You know, the best players, like even with the Invincibles, Pascal Segan was fucking average. He was average. He wasn't amazing. But the players around him absorbed him and we still won games and still won trophies with this guy around. And so I think there's a couple of different factors here. I think Arteta does need to make changes in order to use Holding in a way where his flaws are not so easily like out there and exploitable, right? If you're going to play him, put another center back there, make us more solid, limit the spaces, you know, and be more pragmatic. If you can't do that, remove him, play someone else. So you limit the anxiety around him being in the team and not having a solution. Then the players around him need to suck it up and play regardless and absorb him, make him better. You know, as average as he is, they should be absorbing him if they're as good as we think that they are, right? Like, it's just, I think some people are using Saliba's injury as a reason why we should just throw in the towel because they're too afraid to put any sort of expectation on this team. I'm not saying that we 100% will win because I think it's going to be a really difficult game, but we should not get our pants pulled down. We shouldn't. If we get beaten 3-4-0 or something like that, that's a disgrace based on this season. Like, come on. Peter says we need to play as we're playing a cup final. I agree. This is a cup final. And the level of woe is me and kind of like the body language the last 3 games, and mostly in particular the last 2 games, I do think there's a little bit of feeling sorry for yourself. You're in a title race. Against Southampton, one of the things that really stood out to me is that Southampton were playing as though they were a team in a title race and we were playing as if we were in a relegation scrap and we had given up. The weight of the title race was pushing us down. And a team that is trying to scrap to get out of that bottom 3, we're playing with freedom. It made no sense. You should be excited for the title race. This is the second season in a row where we went into those final games and looked like we did not want to be a part of it. It was too much. Season over. We don't want to do it anymore. And it's not everybody. I think Saka and Martinelli have showed more than enough character in the last couple of games, and Odegaard to a certain extent, where it's kind of like, okay, they're going to show up. Ben White too. I think he's been good in the last 2 games as well. But some players, it looks like this title race is just a little bit too much for them. And if it was up to them, they would just kind of let Man City go above us and then just, okay, whatever. That's just not good enough. This is your cup final. Be excited for the pressure because Arsenal is a high pressure club. Not only are we supposed to be fighting for titles, but we haven't for a long time. So if we don't win it this season, the pressure to win it next season is going to be even greater and even greater and even greater. So why not push now when you have a great opportunity to do so? You know, I'm kind of disappointed in the way that it doesn't feel like they're excited about being in the title race, because they should be, because it's a, what is it? Pressure is a whatever. What is the saying, you guys? Pressure is a privilege. You know what I mean? And I'm not seeing that from some of our players. They look like they're just kind of like, all right, this has been fun, but now that it's like the real deal, I don't want to be a part of it. I could be projecting, but that's what I saw. And the collapse after that game, where everybody was sitting on the ground, I'm like, you guys, you have like 6-7 more games left. Like, yeah, you bottled it against Southampton and it was terrible, but you have 6-7 games to try to make it right, and you can't be acting like this is the final game of the season now. um let's see. Saida says, I don't like Holding, but the fact that he's still here and Arteta hasn't tried experimenting in the easier games tells me he doesn't have an issue with him being in the team. I kind of agree with that. I do think that like Arteta does have this feeling around like, I'm going to play my system and you're going to adapt to the system. So like the example is like Holding playing like Saliba in our system, even though he has no level, he's nowhere near the level to do so. And Tierney inverting when he plays like Nketiah trying to play like Gabriel Jesus when he's, they're all kind of awkward fits, right? It's not exactly what their key attributes are. It's more they're trying to adapt to a system. And Arteta is kind of showing himself to be the type of manager where he's like, I need the players to play my system. I'm not going to adapt to the players that I have. I've done that already. We know in his first half season and the first season, he really adapted to the players that he has. And now he's really going with the system. And it's almost like he's gone fully to the other side, where first he wasn't really doing his system. He was adapting to the players. Now he won't adapt at all. And he's just playing his system. I do think there's got to be times where you say, we can't play this way. Let's try to win this one game this way and then go back to the way that we want to play. But if you go to the Etihad trying to play the way that we have with Holding, we're going to get killed. There has to be some sort of change, but we're also not Manchester City, so there are going to be chances that we're going to have players in the squad that just don't have the level of quality that Manchester City does all the way down the pecking order. And so sometimes you're going to have, a kid or an older guy that's not quite at the level. Like, you have to have some flexibility at Arsenal, I think. I think the stubbornness, I think most top level managers are very stubborn, but I still think that there's some room for tweaking things in order to make sure that you get over certain little humps, if that makes sense. Crispy says, I agree. Blaming Holding is lazy because 2 out of 3 of those games we were in control initially and we bottled. And that's my thing. It's like Holding doesn't have to play poorly, in my opinion, to affect the group. But I also don't agree with him being fully to blame for what has happened over the last couple of games. So again, I do feel like when people are so binary in everything that they speak about, and it's like it's all or nothing, it's black or white, often it's somewhere in the middle, and there's blame to be shared on multiple levels. And I think that's kind of where I am with Arsenal. I think Arteta has some blame. I think, not having a better backup right center back is an issue. And then the group not stepping up, collectively collapsing because they don't know how to deal with not having Saliba in the team, where, other people have adapted. We've done pretty well without Thomas Partey, with, Jorginho. We've adapted okay, without Gabriel Jesus. But when Saliba's out, like all of a sudden, it's just like they can't get it together. And it's just like, nah. OG says Holding is not played badly. However, inclusion has affected the structure, general team play, and that's not all on him. Exactly. I think it's just that simple. Amira says 100% Jess, one player should affect the other 10, especially if they're as good as we know that they can be. I think, yeah, it's such a nuanced conversation and people want to be so extreme, but like, it's just not that easy. Boy says Arteta mismanaged our rotation options earlier in the season. We should comfortably be able to play Kivior right now I think that's a really interesting point and something that I do think is true. The gray areas of the squad 2 seasons running have been kind of left to kind of like sit in a corner in the dark and just almost like we forgot about them in the back of the closet. And like now that we need them, we're like, not sure if I really want this thing. I'm not sure if it works anymore. We can try to use it, but maybe just stick with whatever, you can't do that. And, you know, I think that based on what happened last season, knowing that if Saliba got an injury, we'd be counting on Rob Holding. There should have already been a backup to the backup. You know what I mean? Like we know we can use Holding in some of these like smaller games with less pressure, but the games where, it's like do or die, you have to have something else. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately in terms of like what kind of personalities, not even just quality wise, but personalities do you want going into a cup final? I do think you want experienced players that have been there and done that, and players that are not as emotional. And I do find Holding to be quite emotional during big games. And so he's not somebody that I would naturally gravitate towards, like for a cup final. You want players that are going to be able to keep calm. And of course, you want players that have passion, but when that passion boils over and it screws with your mental, you end up being almost like a hindrance rather than something that helps the team. And so, who are the players that could be really useful to us in this run-in that don't have that same emotional type thing to them, but they offer experience because they've been in those situations before. And the two players that popped into my head were Kieran Tierney and Jorginho. These are two players that beyond, these Zinchenkos and Jesuses and Thomas Partey's, they're the only other players that have played in big games and played serious like positions, serious like roles in teams during big matches. And so, how do you integrate them into, a cup final when they haven't been used that much? Jorginho was used a couple months ago, but then he hasn't really been in it. And Tierney, has pretty much been left on the shelf. And so you leave yourself with very little options when you're so like, I don't know if it's like a point to prove or something like that. It's like you're so far down the pecking order. But for me, like, even though I don't agree with Kieran Tierney being like this shut down 1v1 defender, what I do kind of agree with is that he's not emotional and he's played in big games before. So I would opt for him in a back three. He's played in back threes before. He's played in big games. He's not emotional. We're not going to have the ball as much. And so maybe playing him in a back three would be a better option than just like leaving us in a back four ready to be exposed with Rob Holding, And even from like a Zinchenko standpoint, is he going to be too emotional in this game to be, a benefit, or is he going to be a liability? I'm afraid that Zinchenko is going to be so desperate to kind of show Man City and not make mistakes that he's going to make mistakes. And his behavior against Southampton, although I do appreciate somebody wanting to step up and be a leader, I do find him doing the huddle and the panic and all that kind of stuff to be a little bit, over the top, and we kind of just need you to be a calming force on the ball and not like all erratic and stuff like that. And so you have two players in your team that have played big matches before, that have played cup finals, that have that calmness about their game and their mental. Can you use them, or have you left them on the shelf too long where you can't call upon them now? I don't know. It's the second season running where we haven't really been able to use the entire squad. We've gotten to these points and these players seem to not really be a part of the group. And so, yeah, we have no options. It feels like we have no options. Yeah. And I'm not saying don't do the huddle. I'm just saying, it felt a little like it's against Southampton, just get back into position, get onto the ball and do what you do best. I think Zinchenko's best quality is, controlling possession and being a calming force on the ball. Whereas, calling the huddles and stuff like that, let the captain do that. You know what I mean? Let's see. Shay says it's fine. It was a moment to get the team to calm down. Like I'm saying, I'm not saying never do a huddle, but I think, in that circumstance, I'm not sure that necessarily like helped us. So yeah, but to each his own. I'm not saying don't do it, but I feel like he's just he's a very passionate individual, and sometimes his passion gets him carried away, and we just kind of need you to do the job on the pitch a little bit, you know. But it's, yeah, for me, it didn't come off like the right moment. We weren't necessarily like up against, you know, a really big side or anything like that. We really just needed somebody to put their foot on the ball and get us going, and not necessarily a huddle. But that's just me. And no, I'm not cooking. If you think that what I just said was cooking Zinchenko and saying don't ever do huddles, then you didn't listen. And so let's remove the emotional aspect of what we're hearing. Huddles are fine, but I felt like at that moment it was a little bit too, he was a little bit too erratic and trying to do a little bit too much in that moment. And then I also felt like his overall game was just a little bit on the, I feel like I'm under pressure side. And going into the City match, I just wonder what his mental is going to be like going up against his old team, knowing it's like this is the end game, this and that. Like sometimes you just it doesn't need a huddle. It just needs you to put your foot on the ball and just play the game. That's it. It's just not, it's not that deep. I'm not saying never do a huddle. I'm just saying we didn't need to do one against Southampton. We need to put our foot on the ball. Like that's it. You know. Bailey says sorry, but a huddle against Southampton is naff. Jess is right. I just needed him to put his foot on the ball. You know, it was just a little bit, you know, much for me, you know, but I don't think that like it's wrong to do huddles ever, you know. And you saw Odegaard got in his ass about it. I really don't, you know, I don't think it was appreciated amongst the group. It didn't seem like it. Chris Fraser says needed a huddle moment against the team in 20th tells you everything you need to know. Madness. Marco says, I'm fine with huddles. Do them every 15 minutes if you have to. Frederick Dahl says, thought you guys were talking about food, cooking, misunderstood. Errol says, it would be great to get a draw if we lose. It's not the end. City have a lot of games, Jess. I just think mentally seeing how I actually, so Errol, what I would say is that in a normal circumstance, if we remove ourselves, like let's say that it's not us and this is Liverpool, or let's just say it's a different team, you know, and it's not us. If we removed us from the scenario, everybody would feel that way. You know, if we were talking to rivals and we're like, well, there's still tons of games to go. If you just stay close and maybe they'll drop a point and you'll be able to take advantage of it, right? That's the normal way to think about it. But I do find it very strange that like as a fan base, there's a lot of doom and gloom, and literally like nobody feels like, there's a lot of people that feel like there's no hope with so much time left. And the way that the team kind of crumbled at the end of the game, knowing that there's still 6 games left and it's Southampton and they know they have to go to Man City next, I think we've created a scenario amongst fans, and maybe it's manifesting itself into the dressing room, that if Man City beat us at the Etihad, it's over. And if that is the mentality that we have created as a fan base, and if it's inside the dressing room, that is not a winning mentality. You go into the end, even if you lose against them, you know, you go up against Chelsea, you try to win that game because you just never know what will happen. But that's the narrative. Like, I don't care what the media are saying. Like, you know, the media are going to make it because they have to geek it up. This has to be the ultimate. This has to be it. You know, the media companies and stuff, they have made this the game. But as a fan base, you know, and the players, if they think that this is it, we're in trouble, because that's not the right mentality. And if it was not Arsenal and we were looking at a different team and they were acting the way we are, we would think that they were crazy. That's the problem. That to me, that's the problem, is that we really put these boys on a pedestal and said how great we think they are. And then they hit the hiccup and it's done. It's done, you know? And I find that quite sad. Like, I really do. And I'm not even putting that on anybody else. I feel that too. So I'm questioning myself as well. I'm like, did I ever believe in these boys or not? You know, and why do I feel this way? Like, this is football. Like, we should believe to the end. They should believe to the end. but their body language at the end of that game and the way that like the collective fan base lost their cookies, it's not looking good. It's not looking good. Pinnock says, don't you think that we should have learned from last year that Holding isn't good enough as a sub, especially when we're fighting for the title? Shouldn't we deserve better sub than Kivior or Holding for a CB? I'm not really thinking about Kivior because Kivior is the left-sided center back, and the only way that he'd be used is if, Gabriel was injured. So I think we can take Kivior out. I don't know why everybody lumps Kivior with Holding. We don't know what kind of player he's going to be. And so I find it a little bit unfair that we're trying to lump him in. I think it's just to pile on even further. But in terms of Holding, he's we've known for a long time that he's not good enough. When we gave him the contract, I thought that was a poor idea. Just in terms of like, I know people are like this whole idea that, we're not going to be able to bring in a decent center back to be the fourth choice, but you can get better than Holding. And that's my problem with it is we're always so extreme. It's either, well, we should have 4 world-class center backs, available to us. I don't know if that's realistic, but I don't buy the idea that we can't get better than Holding. I think even working with somebody like Walters for an entire season, look at somebody like, he's a couple of years older, and I know that he's, tipped to be something really special, but I'm just thinking like, even like Levi Caldwell or whatever his name is, like, he's what, 21 years old? He's 20. Rule Walters is what, like 18? Even though I wouldn't want him starting in our biggest games, what I would say is that, like, if the minutes that were given to Holding were given to Rule Walters, where would we be now? Would we feel like maybe we could move Ben White into center back and at least put him at right back? Maybe. So the idea that it was Holding or bust doesn't sit right with me because we know he's not good enough. We know he's not good enough. When they gave him the contract and started talking about like, we're retaining his value. No, I think you move on from players like El Neni and Holding. If you don't trust them to play in your most important games, then you shouldn't have them in your team. And I know Arteta trusts them, but the players around him don't trust him. They don't. You could tell they don't trust him, and that's a problem. So I don't know. We should have learned our lesson, but we didn't. And because he's a good culture guy, he's there, but give him a coaching spot, make him into, the mat. Like, I don't know. I don't want to be too disrespectful, but as a footballer, he is not good enough to play for Arsenal Football Club, not as the fourth center back. And that's been very clear for a very long time. And so it's just, I think we should have learned that lesson. But here we are again in the run-in, Holding starting games, right? Let's see. Harry says, Friday was a really emotional night, very draining, a mixture of shock, heartache, with a small dose of relief, hope. Took me a few days to get over it. God knows how the players felt. Yeah, it was super emotional, especially off the back of the 2 games prior to that when we bottled 2-goal leads, and then bottom of the table Southampton comes to your house and totally bosses you, scores 3 goals, and you have to come back and you only start playing in the 85th minute. That is a lot to get over emotionally. It is. And I agree. But we've put ourselves, I think, in a situation where emotionally we can't handle this. We're not handling the moment well, like, especially the older players. I think that's what's worried me more than anything. It's not really Saka and Martinelli. I think they've done a good job, young players stepping up and trying to do their thing. The players that have kind of scared me a little bit in this scenario is the players that are supposed to be leading us through this. And so, although I do agree with you, it's an emotional situation and I wonder how it's playing on their mental, I think they need to take responsibility for getting to the point where the hiccup has led us to a point where it feels like there's almost no return. Maybe we did get too emotional, and this is where, hindsight is really important. I think Gary Neville was wrong about, saying that Arsenal we're not going to make the top 4, or, you know, he said that initially, and then was saying that, you know, Man United will finish above us and all this kind of stuff, and like acting like we were like Leicester, because we're definitely not Leicester. But maybe where he did kind of get it right is that we don't have the leaders necessary. You only know that, I think, in hindsight. We don't have the leaders, and we don't have the composure, and that's what's showing. Because as emotional as Southampton is, we should be feeling like the team is gassed to get it right against Manchester City, is excited about making it right, is fired up. Like, example, Newcastle lost 3-0 to Aston Villa like a couple of days ago, and then turn around and slap the shit out of Spurs the next game. Didn't look like that was on them at all. If we lost 3-0 to a team, I'm not sure that we turn around, you know, and slap up the next team. I'm not sure if we have the capacity to just let things go, you know, and just get to the next game and be excited to make it right. That's what worries me about the group. And I think that is a leadership thing, you know, where you have the right guys in the locker room telling you the right things because they've been there and done it before. And one of the things that worried me against Liverpool was that not necessarily Odegaard, but Jesus and Xhaka, for me, were a little bit too amped up, a little bit too ready to go, a little bit too, you know, Jesus didn't seem like he was calm. You know, he scored the goal, but he didn't seem like he was calm. He was doing a lot of like flopping, trying to make fouls, you know, getting real, you know. And so I think what we are learning in the run-in is that even though we have some players that have been there and done it before, and obviously this can change, but my feeling right now is that we have players that are leaders, been there and done it before, but maybe not the type of leadership that wins you titles. And that's what Arsenal are missing right now. So yeah. Diallo says, who are those leaders at Newcastle? I'm curious. I mean, maybe Eddie Howe. He's been around for a while. You know, he hasn't really won anything, but you never really know. Kieran Trippier, I think he's one of their leaders. Bruno Guimaraes is definitely one of their leaders. And they have one of the older squads in the league as well. So even though they don't have winners, I think they have players that have been around a little bit longer. The legend says, we showed previously in the season before Saliba got injured that we have the minerals to beat tough teams. Look at our away record. The pressure of the run in has got to their heads. And no, Diallo, I did not say that Newcastle have more leaders than Arsenal. These are two different things. I feel like we don't have the ability to just let things go, whether it's, you know, we had a bad game against Southampton, and as a fan base, we don't feel like the team has enough in them to shake that off and move forward, you know. And I think that sometimes you have that ability when you have the right leaders in the group with you. You know, that's what I'm saying. I never said Newcastle have better leaders than us, but I'm not sure that they can do that they can shake off that bad result and not make that bad result into another bad result and another bad result and another bad result. You know, I'm not saying Newcastle have better leaders. I'm just saying that I do think leadership sometimes can help you wipe that stuff away and move on to the next game. There's a reason why we go through each one of our blips have been very similar. The first one, we lost to Everton, drew to Brentford, then lost to Man City, and then really kind of like struggled in the beginning against Aston Villa and turned it around. This time we lost. We drew to Liverpool after being ahead. We drew to West Ham after being ahead, and then we drew again. Both of our blips have come right before we're about to play Man City, a couple games before, and we've turned one bad result into like 3. This one could potentially be 4. So that's all I'm saying, is that right now we don't have the ability to like make one bad result into just one bad result. We tend to hold on to it, let it kind of go for a little bit longer. And they've been very similar. It's like we're looking too far ahead to Manchester City, that the results ahead of it is like we're too nervous. And so regardless to Newcastle, if they have the leaders or not, what I do like that they were able to do is shake off a really bad result against Aston Villa with top 4 on the line and turn around and batter Spurs, you know? So yeah. Cafan says Arsenal need a calming influence on the team. Maybe the introduction of Jorginho back into the team is needed. Yeah. Frederick says, opinion, Arsenal should play Odegaard behind the striker against City, in my opinion, to maximize Odegaard's ability as a playmaker and setting up chances. Maybe. I just don't think anything will change. Lynn says, Jess, we lost 1-0 against Everton and then went and beat Fulham 4-1. So I don't agree with you there. No, when we lost to Everton at home, then we turned around and drew to Brentford right after. And then we lost to City 3-1. So when we beat Everton when we lost to Everton, we didn't have a win in between that. We went on a run of games where we didn't win one, and we lost to City in the cup. We lost to Everton. We drew to Brentford, and then we lost to Man City. So we still this season have done the same thing where we make one bad result into several. We can't rebound quick enough. So this is incorrect. And we never beat Fulham 4-1. We beat Fulham 2-1 and we beat Fulham 3-0. So I think that's incorrect. So yeah, I'm not saying, I never said that Newcastle have better leaders than Arsenal. I never said that out of my mouth. So remember, you guys, listen to what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I did think that was really impressive to turn one bad result into one bad result. And I think Arsenal's problem is we struggle to do that, maybe because we don't have the leaders in the squad that can get us back on track. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, Marco says, Jess, Pep said he was surprised that Arteta went man-to-man in the FA Cup game. We lost 1-0, but almost beat them. Do you think Arteta will go man-to-man against them on Wednesday? I don't know what Arteta is going to do. He has to have something planned, but I think tactics are going to be really important. But I think what's going to be more important for Arsenal is getting their heads out of their asses and performing like it's the game of their life. I think, as I know people don't like passion and desire, but I do think those things really count in a cup final, in a penultimate game, like something that's going to be like do or die. And so the tactics need to be spot on. And I'm not sure what Arteta is going to do, but I'm more concerned about getting up to the level of energy mentality required to even start to compete against Manchester City. Because for me, the tactics don't even matter if you turn around and give away an easy goal right in the first 5 minutes of the game because you're not concentrating, because you're still in your feelings. That to me, that's more significant than the tactics. That he has to get them up for this game and get them to believe that this is not it. But it's crazy. Chris says, if we go man-to-man without Saliba, we will lose. Arsenal Forever says, I can only see us getting 7 points from our next 4 games. Well, let's just look at the first game, because from my perspective as well, I do think that things can change in football very quickly. You get a decent result against Manchester City, then you play against Chelsea and you win. I think Arsenal have shown this season that we can turn it around. It just takes us a little bit to turn it around. So I'm not going to start counting points from the final games because I'm feeling bad about us right now. All I'm focused on is the Manchester City game. What can we do for that? Boy says, we not keeping a clean sheet against City anyway, not after letting 3 in from Southampton. This is the thing I don't like. Genuinely, there's 135 of you guys in here. Make sure you guys subscribe. But I'm not seeing a single person, maybe one, that has any sort of positivity whatsoever. Not even in terms of just the game, but the season. That is genuinely worrying to me. Even though we know it's going to be difficult, there is no belief in this team or the manager. I get that it looks really bad, but like I said, I speak to rivals every day. Sensible rivals, by the way, that think it's absolutely nuts the way Arsenal fans have thrown their team under the bus and are walking away from this. It's crazy. It's crazy. We never believed, did we? That. Yeah. Boy says, get me into that Arsenal locker room. I will put that rocket up their asses. I mean, they need to believe. Like, they need to believe. Like, I mean, they have to believe that they have a chance, and that when we play Chelsea next week, that no matter what happens against Manchester City, the fans are going to make it such a terrible atmosphere for Chelsea that they just say fuck it, because they're having a bad season, but I feel like we're going to play straight into their hands. I feel like we're going to play straight into their hands. And if this is how the fan base is feeling, then I'm sure that the players will feel the same way. Because I don't think there's any surprise that when the anxiety of the fans went up, the anxiety of the players went up. I don't think that's any surprise. I think we're so connected, people don't realize it. Saida says Arsenal fans are emotional. It makes sense because of what we've gone through in the past 2 decades. Here's my thing about being emotional. I don't think that I'm not saying that like I don't understand why we're emotional, but what I would say is that if it's this bad where one moment we're so excited about the team and we think we can do anything, to we hit these 3 draws and we're still, ahead in the title race, and we have to go to Manchester City, get a result, try to win it, and there's still 5-6 games left, but everybody's packing up, then I would say let's not be so gung-ho next time. Even when we're sitting at the top of the table, 8 points clear. Next season, I don't want to hear anybody talking about title races. I don't, because if you're a skeptic based on seasons past, then you should have never gotten carried away with the title race to begin with. And I'm not saying it was you, Saida. What I'm saying is that there's too many people that were gung-ho, in my opinion, for the title race when we were 8 points clear, 5 points clear, whatever, midway through the season, where this flip-flop, this really drastic flip-flop, feels very strange for people that are skeptical, either you believed or you don't, and that's what's scary to me, is that one minute we were just like, I think if we get into another title race, though, I do think a lot of people will be a lot more skeptical and a lot more quiet than we were this time around, because if we don't win it, this will traumatize people for sure. Jess says, Chris says, Jess, it's pretty cool. You're saying a lot of the same stuff that Thierry said on the interview last week. Feel it, don't become it, is how he ended. Facts, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, you can see that the emotion, like, this should never feel like the end, even if the media and stuff paints it as the end, because they will, because they have to make this feel like the penultimate game. Like, this has to feel like whoever's going to win this game. They've been saying it since January, that whoever wins this game will probably win the league. So just put that out of your head, not them. But like, if the fans and the players feel like there's no chance from here, from where we're sitting right now, then why were we talking about title races to begin with? Why are we talking about this team being great anyway? Like, it's just, and I'm saying this to myself as well, because I'm like, that don't make no sense. It doesn't, even if you feel like it's unlikely, you should still feel like there's a chance, but there's a genuine pessimism around everything now. And I'm like, then why are we so gung-ho? It doesn't make any sense. Lucas says, and it doesn't mean I don't like the team, just me had always telling me it will be very hard to win. Fair enough. Taida says, I think most Arsenal fans didn't believe we could win it. There came a point where rival fans were almost forcing Arsenal fans to admit we were going to, and that's where the main belief came from. I don't know, Saida. I think you're always pretty level-headed, but what I will say is that a lot of people were acting like they were in this title race, like at least emotionally invested in it enough where they were willing to go to the end of the season really believing that the boys had a chance, that they could really win it. And so this about face is really quick and very like 180 for me. So, I don't know. It feels a little like a little bit like we're not used to being in a title race, so we expect it to be easy. And now that there's no buffer and it's the seat is getting hotter, we want to run instead of actually sit in it and really back the team, because that would be harder. It would be harder to sit there and back the team and believe than just say it's over now and run away. And then it also just makes me think that we actually never really rated this team the way that we were saying we did, and that distresses me a little bit. But there was a point in time where rivals were saying that we needed to say we were in a title race and say we were going to win it. But I don't even know if that's such a bad thing, because from where we were, you know, and how good this team is, I think we should have felt like we had a good chance of winning the league, because we did, you know? So I think you're either, if you were a skeptic the entire time, then you were a skeptic the entire time. But there are too many people that I've seen flip-flop massively from a week ago till now, or a couple weeks ago till now. And I think you have to really look at that. Lath says, we rate this team, but squad depth is really showing. Chris says, I think that's a bad thing. C. Walder says, I was getting a bit annoyed listening to people saying it was ours to lose. I think that's to blame for the emotion now. Shay says, we were outperforming our XG. Let's be honest, our project is not complete. I'm excited for the summer transfer window. I never saw anything that was saying that we were outperforming our XG. I think we are where we are because we actually deserved it, and we weren't getting lucky. We were just the best team. Like, I don't think that we were in the wrong, or anybody's in the wrong for believing that we had a chance of winning this league, because we did do. You know what I mean? But all this, like, we were never really that good. We were getting lucky, like, just next season. Well, not buying it, guys. I'm not buying it. D Moore says, being the underdog in big games is safer. Last season, we were almost won them in December at the Etihad before Jacques and Gabriel helped them come back. We don't perform well in big games against Liverpool and Man City, and we just haven't in the recent games. We just capitulate and just let them have it. I was very disappointed in that game. I thought we had it in our hands. And what I will say is that, like, these last two seasons also showed that we are not good when we're ahead. So maybe we do like to be an underdog, but we were 9 points clear of Spurs and they overtook us for 4th. And Man City, if they do win the league, they will have overtaken a team that was in front the entire time. And I don't 100% believe that it's just because Man City are so much better than us. I think we have to put a little bit more pressure on the team in terms of, we believe you're good enough, and these things need to change in order for it not to happen again. But we genuinely thought we had a chance of winning it. We didn't get it over the line because we were not good enough, in terms of how we manage the season, how we manage those games. But we can get there by doing blank, 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 instead of just going like, we were never really that good and we were faking our XG and all this kind of stuff. This team had every chance of winning the league. They were good enough. They were good. They're good enough. Like, had we had beat Liverpool and beat West Ham and beat Southampton, we'd be well on our way. So yeah, it's such a difficult one, but I don't think we should back away from it. But it's so much easier to back away from it now because people don't want to sit in the seat. They don't want to sit in the seat anymore. Diallo says, I personally did not make any prediction until we played City at home. That's when we showed our shortcomings. I hear that. Amira says, since last season, we haven't dropped points in more than 3 games in a row. Copium, hopium, delusion, whatever you want to call it. I'm full of it. Rather be in this position than just fighting for top 4. That's another thing, is I think there's some Arsenal fans that would prefer to just be 2nd, 3rd, comfortably behind Manchester City and just going off into the sunset instead of feeling the pressure. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying, like, we said we wanted to be in a title race. Now we get to see what this team is like in one. I'm more on the side of, like, if we don't win it, we had every chance to win it, and we need to look at why we didn't. But I don't want to pretend as though we were just up there because of some sort of luck or something. Because I think this team was the best, is still the best team in the, up until this point, has been the best team in the league. And I don't think it was a mirage or anything like that. And I would not have wanted to be in a top 4 scrap. But yeah, it's so difficult. I understand why people are doom and gloom. Reggie says, the hardest part of being a fan is believing in your team when it looks bleak. This is the hardest thing. It really, really is, because I was shocked that the fans left at 3-1 against Southampton. I was. And I'm not, if you were there, I'm not saying shame on you. I'm just saying that's how fickle we are, really, is the team needed us. We genuinely always could have turned that game around. And at 3-1, people were leaving in the middle of a title race, you know? And then online, people left the stadium, literally. That's how it felt. Like people were vacating the title race. It's done. And it is hard. But I think if we actually believed in this team, we'd sit in the seat with them, you know? Afsar says, just the Premier League title was in our hand and we have thrown it away for no reason. And that's why our fans are angry. I'm not saying you can't be angry, but at the same time, like, if this wasn't our team and we were looking from the outside of another team being in our position where we are right now, having to go to the Etihad to try to get something from there, also knowing that, you know, in the off chance that Manchester City could drop points, that we still need to be performing at a high level in order to make sure that we can keep pressure on them, we would say that that's what that group should do. But basically what we're doing is going, it's over. Let's just be mad, kill the players online, pretend we never rated them, pretend we never really had a chance, and go into our holes until the season starts again. I don't believe in that. I get that we could be angry, but I genuinely do feel like as a fan base, we're also handling this pretty poorly. Boy says, we are still winning this league. Don't you dare get it twisted. But these fools who get to wear the jersey need to come correct for the rest of the season. Fans also need to come correct. But yes, the players need to come correct. Everybody collectively need to come together. Like this is just no. Everybody needs to come together, I think. Shay says there's definitely plenty of stats showing XG outperformance. There's nothing wrong with this, but we can be honest. I have to look at it because we have been, I think if we were actually outperforming our XG the way that we're saying, people would have pointed it out to us by now. I follow all the stats guys, Arsenal stats people, and not one of them have said slow your roll. We are outperforming our XG and we're nowhere near as good as what people are thinking we are. So it's something that I'll definitely look into. But if you're saying that we're outperforming our XG, so we're never as good as we thought we were, and that's okay, why we should just like back away and act like we're never in this title race, I don't believe that. You know, so I would have to politely disagree with you there. The team that I watched from August till now was the best team in the league this season, you know, despite everything. Like they just were, like, you know. Diallo says all those Arteta outers shouting about 8-point gaps are disingenuous. The gap was never that big realistically. Seawalder says I've seen enough to know this is no one season wonder. Yeah, it's definitely not. But I also see people, you know, and I also think people also, because they don't want to get bantered by rivals, they say what rivals want them to say in order to kind of like shield themselves. I've never seen a fan base cave so quickly to rival pressure in my life, you know, and start saying the same things that they're saying, that we're going to be a one season wonder. The only reason why we're there is because of Chelsea and Liverpool or fell off. You know, the players aren't really that good. You know, we're just getting lucky the entire season. A lot of, you know, refereeing decisions and stuff really went our way. We were lucky, you know, all this kind of stuff. And seeing people parrot that stuff back just so that rivals, it's honestly, for me, it's just cowardice. You know, I've never seen a fan base brag so much and then stab the team in the back so quickly. Wouldn't want to be some of our fan base's friends. Like I wouldn't, you know. Crispy says being angry is all right, but turning on the team is not. That's kind of where I'm at. You know, if you love somebody, you can be angry at them, but like, you know, it's because you want the best for them, but you're still going to support. And I'm finding the support part is a little bit missing. And like, obviously, like, I wanted to really throw in the towel after Southampton. Like, I was like, I don't even care what happens for the rest of the season. But nah, Gonna watch them on Wednesday, hoping to see signs of life, because the season is not over even if we don't win the league. And one thing that Arsenal fans need to be conscious of, very conscious of, is if we throw on the towel now as a fan base and we don't support them from now until the very end, we could slip even further if we're not careful, because they still need to feel like they have something to fight for, pride and all that kind of stuff. And so if we lose to Man City and then we turn around and that Emirates Stadium is quiet against Chelsea, we will lose to them as well. And so there's still something to fight for, even if we don't win the league, because we need to get secure second place. And I think basically we need a point, technically 2 for goal difference, for Champions League. But the sooner we get that, the sooner we can relax, So I think people are really short-sighted in the way that they're just like, fuck the season, I'm done, team, blah, blah, blah. They're bottle jobs, like, fuck them. Like, I'm so angry at them, like, da-da-da. React, I would say, however you would want the team to react from here, you react the same, because it doesn't make sense to act differently than what you would want the team to act. Like, you know what I mean? If you want them to, forget about Southampton, forget about West Ham, forget about, whatever, and turn around and put in a really good performance and, really go for the cup final against Man City, then we need to do the same, can't just be asking for shit, Diallo says, Jess, without Saliba, we are never going to win the league, and I'm very sanguine about it. I don't care. Like, I don't, to me, I don't care about that. I may feel that way, but at the end of the day, I need them to perform until the end of the season, because one, you'll never know what happened. You never know what will happen. God forbid, Manchester City slip up at all. They may not, but we've performed poorly after going to Man City. We can't even capitalize on it. God forbid we don't win another game for the rest of the season because everybody just collapsed. So I don't really care about that. We all know that without Saliba, it's going to be really difficult. But at the same time, I really do question people like that feel like as a club, it's good enough to not really compete for the league from this point because we lost one player. I think it's a cop-out, and I also think that it's a nice, comfortable excuse to just kind of relieve pressure. We lost Saliba, which made it so much more difficult to compete, but it's never a reason why we couldn't have beat West Ham, why we couldn't have beat Southampton, and why we couldn't beat Liverpool. And had we had beat all 3 of those teams, we would not have to go to the Etihad and win. We would just need a result. So I'm not buying the just without Saliba, there's no, that's a nice, comfortable excuse to let the pressure off. It made it more difficult, but Arsenal is too big of a club to let one injury fuck up our season like that. I think we should have acted quicker, made better decisions, made sure that Holding was not playing in these games. But I don't agree that it's just like this is the reason why we're never going to win the league, because Saliba's not there. This BS to me. Sorry. Let's see. Lucas says we are overperforming XG and XP by a lot. We have 12 more points than expected and saw a graph on TV before Southampton. Fair enough. 12 points, that's quite a bit. I didn't see that, but yeah, maybe. I still don't, I'm not sure if I agree with it, but yeah. Yo-Yo says small club energy permeates throughout this fan base. It's embarrassing. Let's see. Machego says, I think Martinelli will get a goal. He loves big games. Let's see. Boy says, it's crazy cope from rival fans to claim this team is a flash in the pan. They could instead say that Xhaka Party won't capture this form again, and there will be debate, but they can't own it. Crispy says, football is about putting it on the line as a fan. Anyone who can't hack it can dip. Christopher says, I don't think so, Tim. So you guys are talking to each other there. The Legend of Renegade says, Jess, do you think selling Joe Willock was a mistake? His purple patch of goals has dried up, but his overall game is solid. That pass to Isak was sensational. this is a genuine question, which is fine, but I do find this type of revisionism to be quite um, coincidental when we're in difficult form, or the players that are currently playing in that position aren't players that we really back. Joe Willock made one pass that he'll probably never make again. And the reason why his game has improved so much is because he's a starter basically at Newcastle. And so he was never going to start at Arsenal. And nobody, when he was sold, was advocating for him starting in front of anybody. So for me, sometimes things happen the way that they're supposed to happen. We're supposed to keep the players. Basically, we sold Joe Willock and we used that money to get Odegaard. And I would never trade Odegaard for Joe Willock. And I would have never given Joe Willock a starting position in order for him to become the player that he is right now, which is a solid player. But if we're honest, like when Newcastle, when they get into the Champions League, they'll buy better players and Joe Willock will go down the pecking order. So I'm happy for him. And that pass was sensational, but that's it. I don't think it was a mistake. It's revisionism at its best. Nobody at the time was really advocating for Joe Willock, because the thing is, if you were advocating for Joe Willock to stay, you were advocating for him to start, because that's the reason why he left. He wanted playing time, and nobody at the time thought he was good enough to start for us, because as much as we don't like Vieira and Sambi, I see performances from Willock that were like that. Maybe not as bad as Fabio Vieira, but I have seen him get lost and not really know what to do, and that's because he wasn't ready. And so sometimes things just happen the way that they're supposed to. Like Guendouzi, he wasn't supposed to be at Arsenal. He's where he's at, and nobody's really asking for him anymore. And Willock, that pass was sensational, but I wouldn't trade him for Odegaard, which is the trade that you would have been making, and that's the context in which we need to speak about these things. But no, I don't think it's a mistake. I think he's exactly where he needs to be. You know, genuinely happy for him. I saw people this season saying we shouldn't have gotten rid of Iwobi and he would have been perfect in that left 8 spot. We do this every single season. Somebody that leaves, if they do even have a little bit good season, half a good season, we want to trade our team for them, even though we've seen them at our team. Like, he's I know Joe Willock is a good player. He's from our academy, but we definitely should be shooting higher than Joe Willock. Despite how you feel about Sambi or Vieira, by the way. Denver says, Joe Willock had to go. Come on, stop clutching at straws. I didn't hear this Willock shit when we were winning. Get a grip. I mean, Denver said it perfectly. Ivy says, Joe Willock didn't suit our system. Same goes for Pepe and other players some Arsenal fans keep bringing up. Yeah, and I'm not saying like I haven't 100% agreed with everything that the club has done, but when we sell players and we bring in players that are better than them, I can't complain. And genuinely, that's pretty much what we've done. And so if they do well somewhere else, I don't miss them. Even when our players are not playing as good as they possibly can, I don't regret it, And Odegaard is light years ahead of Willock. And that's what we're talking about. Willock was not going to stay and sit on our bench. So this whole, we shouldn't have gotten rid of him because Fabio Vieira and Sambi, Willock wanted to start. And I didn't want Joe Willock starting at Arsenal then. And we don't like young players having to learn on during difficult matches either. So that's the other thing, is that if you wanted Joe Willock to stay, then you wanted him to start. And based on how we don't like Kivior or Fabio Vieira or Sambi learning at Arsenal during difficult moments, I don't think you guys would want Joe Willock to either. So let's keep it a stack sometimes. Boy says, now, Jess, it's different spec when we talk about Willock. He is not Iwobi. Put some respect on Willock's name. I didn't say Iwobi should have come back. That's what Arsenal fans were saying because he was having a half decent season at Everton, that he would have been perfect for left 8. So I'm not comparing them. Arsenal fans are the ones who are saying that we should bring Iwobi back or we should have never sold him. Look at the player that he's become. You get tired of seeing that. Diallo says, saying I don't think we can win the league with Rob Holding is not BS. It's an opinion born out of facts and data. I'm not gonna. You guys see that? My light went out again. Oh shit. Let's see. Yeah, my light went out. Whatever. Again, Saying I don't think we can win the league with Rob Holding is not BS. No, you didn't say I don't think we can win the league. You said it's like an irrefutable fact that without Saliba we could not win the league. And it's an opinion, and it, to me, it's not facts, because we could have won those games with Rob Holding. Like, let's keep it absolute 100. Had we had won those games, we would not be going into the game against Manchester City feeling like we needed to win it in order to maintain our position. So not having Saliba has made it harder, but I don't think it's impossible. I think it's a really convenient narrative to make it like, oh, well, we didn't have our best player, so, one of our best players, so, that's it. Yeah, I get that it would have been harder, but it was Southampton and West Ham. It really was very similar to, we had enough to beat Southampton and Brighton and Crystal Palace last season, and we didn't. And that didn't have anything to do with having those injuries. Those injuries came after. And, had we'd had those points, we wouldn't have had to go to Spurs and Newcastle and won those games. We would just had to perform. I think it's convenient, but we'll just agree to disagree there for sure. Boy says, does your home have an inverter battery? No, it's not the home, you guys. It's this light that I have, and it hasn't been it wasn't 100% charged, so it went out because we've been talking for a long time. That's why. Lucas says, women's team are without 6 starters and we are crying about Holding. It's all mentality. I didn't want to bring this up because I know people don't want to hear about it, and some people really don't care about women's football, but just for the sake of argument, I do think that their performance against Wolfsburg are the second most successful women's team in terms of European football. If you want to give a comp for it, like, they're not Real Madrid, but let's say they're Bayern, and Arsenal went to Wolfsburg with 6 starters missing and got a draw. And the reason for that is because they had the mentality, and they said that they went there with togetherness and they performed. And so now they get to take that draw back to the Emirates, which is a place that will be damn near full, where they'll hopefully beat Wolfsburg and go to the final of the Champions League. And so everything is not comparable. I understand that, but I do think that there's an element of, if you just get your head out of your ass and you perform and you lift your mentality to a place where you can actually compete, then we can start talking about tactics and how to mitigate Holdings, flaws and all that kind of stuff, because like, we really are pretending as though a worse Arsenal team didn't beat Manchester City in, a European or an FA Cup, semifinal a couple of years ago. So it's not like impossible for us to compete against them. My issue is that I'm not sure we're going to be able to get up to the level to compete because we're so down on ourselves, and that doesn't have anything to do with Saliba not being here. That's just mentality for me. Again, there have been Arsenal teams that have carried bad players in the team before, so yeah, I think mentality is going to be really important. Boy says, women's team and men's teams are not at the same points in their development and eras. I strongly disagree with that. I think Jonas Idewal came in a season after Mikel Arteta did, and they have completely revamped that team, brought in a lot of young players. And so they're actually, I think, in terms of rebuilding a team that has the experience, are actually in their infancy. So yeah. And regardless of if where they are in their progression, the argument is really, if you have the mentality, you can go and compete. You may not win, but the idea that we cannot go there and at least put in a good performance against Manchester City, I find that a little bit of okay, well, it's just convenient. It's very convenient. And I know this because if you go outside of Arsenal and you talk to rivals that have any sort of sense, they think we are being cowards. 100%. They're like, of course you guys can go there and compete. You may still lose, but the idea that it's just okay for you guys to go out there and ship a bunch of goals and just be, pathetic because holding is there, it just shows a bad mentality for the club. And I agree. Like, Saliba not being there makes it harder, but it doesn't make it like absolutely mission impossible. Like, we're cannot pass a ball. Yo-Yo says, we all knew Arsenal didn't have the best squad in the Prem, and we were always going to have to punch above our weight. Gooners love excuses. Lucas says, boys don't have that never die attitude yet. Hope that comes with time and new players. And that's what I'm saying. Like, people are like, they're not in their same eras. The players that we had out there are like young players. Like Wubin Moy, she, I think she's maybe like 3 years out of college. I used to watch her play college. Like, she hasn't been around forever. Blackstenius, like, she's like 20. Palova, we just bought her like in January. So no, like, I don't agree. I think, you either have that mentality or you don't. So yeah. Let's see. Diallo says, I watch all the women's games. They are a different breed. Those girls. Katie McCabe is my fave. I agree. Ruben says, Jonas is the reason they won. Arteta has plan A, and that's it. Losing the league would be a failure without any trophies. Diallo says, but if you look at the Wolfsburg game, there is a clear chemistry to the men's game against Southampton. Give away 2 silly early goals and fight back to draw. Chris A says, some of these fans question their mentality. I hope you are at the top of your game in your fields. Blaze says, Jess, Arsenal Women Club play good football without our best players. I watched some of their couple of clips in Twitter, and the way they play football is very good. The thing about again, Wolfsburg is no joke. Like, they're one of the best teams in the world. Like, Lyon is the only other team that's more successful than them in Europe. So, but I think it's all mentality. You go down 2-0, to 2 sloppy goals, and you could just give up, or you could tighten up and fight until the end. And I don't think we actually require our team to fight, because right now we're giving them an out and saying, you go to Man City because Saliba's not there, you have no chance of winning. So just go out there and just do whatever. I really hope Arteta doesn't have the same mentality as our fans, or else they're just going to go out there and ship 5-6 goals. And nobody would be able to blame them based on what we've said, because clearly nobody thinks they can go out there and compete anyway. So if they ship 6 goals, or they get absolutely slapped, don't come to the after party talking about, blah, blah, blah. I can't believe they did this and that. You guys are basically saying that that's all that can happen. That's it. Saksham says, we should switch to a back 5 or else City will kill us. It'll be cool. Like, if we did kind of switch some things up. And I think that's what we're going to do now, is we're going to build a little bit of a lineup and kind of talk about what we could do to maybe make it a little bit less scary in a way. Marco says, I disagree that the fan base doesn't believe. Some fans don't believe. That's okay. We're all different. I think most fans believe we can win the league right now. What I'll say is, like, even though I disagree that we didn't have a chance to win the league because we were outperforming our XG and all this kind of stuff, so basically saying we were never as good as what we thought we were, fine. I disagree, but if you've always said that, that's fine. If you always said that you thought that we can win this league, then that's fine. What I don't like is we can win it, and when you want to talk shit to rivals, you're all in their face and all this kind of stuff. And then when the seat gets a little bit hotter and you get a little bit like, oh my gosh, like the pressure is on, then you do a complete 180 with 6 games to go and just say, oh, we're out. Saliba's out. It's gone. It's done. We're done. Get away. Like, I'm done. That's where my issue is the flip-floppery, and I was always a little bit reluctant, about it. But I think when it's all said and done, I will still feel like we had a chance, and if we don't win it, it's because we weren't good enough, and there's things that we could have done better to make it so. So yeah, let's see. Let's tinker. I know. Remember when we hated when Arteta tinkered? with the lineup. Do you guys remember that? And now all of a sudden we're like, Tinker, please. Please give me a Tinker. That sounds terrible. All right. All right. So obviously Ramsdale. Hopefully he doesn't shit the bed in the first couple of minutes. I can't believe he did that, but whatever. Obviously we have Gabrielle in here. Boop. And Ben White, who I don't think has looked overawed in the last couple of games, which is good to see. Also, moving forward, I do think that this is a really good test to see who's actually good enough to be at Arsenal long term, because next season we'll have Champions League, we'll be expected to compete again. And you know, I think that like there's going to be an even bigger like level that we have to go to. Some players are going to have to play every 4 games and are going to be expected to play Europe and Premier League and you know, do all that kind of stuff. We're going to be expected to actually compete in all 4 competitions. And I think some players are showing that the mentality is definitely there, and then others are maybe not so much. And those are probably the positions that need to be looked at. So there is also like a weeding out process that naturally comes anyway. But let's talk about some of these positions and the formation. Now, I don't necessarily feel as though I'm 100% sold on changing the formation all the way, but we could, we really could. But what I'll tell you guys, what I would do just to maybe limit some of the chaos and give us kind of like maybe a better foundation, because what my fear is that like we're not going to have as much possession as we're used to having. So out of possession, we need to be a lot better. Out of possession in the last couple of games, we've been atrocious. There's been too much space in midfield. The gaps are just there. We look like we haven't looked like Arteta's Arsenal for a couple of games. And I think that's what that line naturally retreating and backing up, because Rob Holding is in the team. And then also like there's just that big gap, and like our midfielders don't want to commit. We really suffered because like, Vieira was in the team and he couldn't do anything like what Xhaka does. And so we suffered quite a bit from that. And I also think that like when you have kind of like an issue, you need to stabilize. And I think having a left back that moves into midfield naturally kind of it doesn't really destabilize you, but it doesn't do anything to make you more secure at the back. It may give you more numbers in midfield, but it really didn't help, I don't think. And so with less possession, I would say that I would play Kieran Tierney no matter what formation, because for several reasons, because we don't need even though like obviously we use Zinchenko to help us with possession, I actually think in this game we need to be more direct. I think we can build from the back or build through the thirds without him. It's going to be fewer and far between, because like we're not going to have the ball, and but I think kind of how we played last season, where Kieran Tierney played these games, like it was fine, but we went a little bit longer to, Saka and Martinelli. We combined in those channels and stuff like that. I think that's what we're kind of going to have to do. And so I find Zinchenko's role a little bit redundant when we're not going to have the ball. And so we just want to have like a traditional back 4 that's just going to kind of be back there defending. Had Tomiyasu been fit, I would have said play Tomiyasu, but Kieran Tierney is fine. He can kind of be like an extra defender or an extra center back there. But also, even though he's not as calm on the ball, I don't think he'll be as like overly passionate about the match and all that kind of stuff. So maybe Kieran Tierney would be a better choice. Obviously Thomas Partey has to play, but he's been an absolute like head case in the last couple of games, and he's another one that, I'm looking at in terms of like next season when it's Champions League, get to play every 4 games. You're going to be playing in big games. Have I ever seen Thomas Partey really step up in a big match and get us over the line? Especially like in the run-in, he's either not available for the run-in or he's having games like he's had recently. And so I'm looking at him as somebody that like maybe is not it, even though he's a very talented player. Like at 30, I need you dragging us over the line. I need you to be the guy. Like, even though I know you don't have Saliba behind you or Xhaka next to you, I expect you to be able to handle that pressure a little bit more and not just like absolutely lose your head. So he needs to have a good game. I actually would play Jorginho, and the reason for that is because he's been in these big games before. He, is not the most mobile, but I don't expect us to be sitting up at the halfway line. I expect us to be kind of sitting a little bit lower, a little bit more of a mid block. And if you want to be able to maintain some sort of possession in midfield, you're probably going to want somebody like Jorginho sitting at the base of your midfield, but he has to have somebody holding his hand, and that's going to have to be Thomas Partey. Also, you limit the gap in between and behind him if you have Kieran Tierney instead of Zinchenko. I think as a rule of thumb for Arsenal, Jorginho and Zinchenko should never play together. It's never worked. We were able to come back from behind against Aston Villa, but in general, they're redundant. They both try to do the same things at the base of midfield. Neither of them have legs or the athleticism to get up and back. And so we only need one of them, but Jorginho's experience, his ability on the ball, and him sitting in a double pivot, which is the only way he can play at the base of our midfield, would be something that I'd look at. I'd play Odegaard as well because obviously Saka, I hope everybody is ashamed for all the bad things that they said about him the other day. It was disgraceful. Martinelli, obviously, because he's our most informed player. And then the striker position, and I think that's the only other questionable position, just because, Gabriel Jesus, for me, has looked a little bit emotional in the last couple of games. I think his after the game against Southampton, I didn't love what he said. It's a shame, and I know Arteta won't do this, but I actually feel less, confident with Zinchenko and Gabriel Jesus in the team for this game based on their last couple of performances, and just like the emotion of having to play against your ex team, like your other team, and like how important the game is. I almost feel like I'd rather have Trossard because he seems to be a little bit more calm, a little bit more, in his body when he's playing, like less like, scattered. So I would consider playing Trossard, but I know Arteta wouldn't do it. But that's kind of what I would do, because I don't know. I feel very strange about these two. I don't know if we're going to get that. You know how every time an ex-player plays against us, they step up and they score and they have the games of their lives. I actually feel like the opposite will happen with Zinchenko and Jesus, to be honest. I think that they'll have a little bit of a difficult time. So this is what I would do, even though I'm pretty sure we will see the exact same lineup that started against Southampton, and that worries me. And he'll never drop Xhaka. We know that, but this is what I'd go with. And I know people are like, but Jorginho and blah, blah, blah. Jorginho is fine in a double pivot. He's played in big games before. He's actually played more Champions League games than Xhaka has ever played in his life. So this whole idea that Jorginho cannot play in our midfield because of the tricky midfield and we need legs, Xhaka doesn't have legs either. But the problem is when we play, like when Arteta plays with players that don't actually fit the system, he doesn't change anything to limit what they can't do. And so playing Jorginho in a single pivot is suicidal. Like, you can't do it. You can't play him with Xhaka and Odegaard ahead of him and Zinchenko behind him, moving beyond him. It doesn't work. But if you play him in a double pivot, which is how he's always played with Chelsea, he'll be fine because he has somebody else to manage the space and manage the pitch while he manages the ball. And, if you tell Tierney to stay back, he'll stay back. So that's why I chose this lineup. It's so harsh, like on Jesus and Zinchenko, but Trossard just strikes me as somebody that's quite calm, and I'm feeling very worried about all the stuff around the Manchester City game and having ex-Manchester City players in our team that don't seem to have their head on straight. Saksham says Jesus can't finish in front of an empty goal. Blaze says Jess Xhaka is not fit to play versus City on Wednesday. He was just ill. That's it. So I'm sure he'll play, but I would not like, this is what I would go with. But I'm also not precious about dropping Xhaka as Arteta is, because we know that Xhaka is like Arteta's favorite player. Like that's his general on the pitch. So he would never drop Xhaka. But I also feel like tactically, sometimes there's better fits. And so I would do something different. Xhaka against the Manchester City defense, I just don't really see him getting into the box and playing like that, third guy in the midfield role. I don't see him being a benefit there because, again, like we're not going to have as much of the ball, so Xhaka on the ball for me doesn't have as much in his locker as Jorginho, or you could put Xhaka in the double pivot. That's fine, but I also just think Jorginho, like, what's the point of having him if you're not going to play him in matches where he's probably the only one that's played in big matches like this before and actually come out well, or on the winning side. I don't think we've, used him maybe enough, but I kind of, yeah. So you could put Xhaka there because that's most likely what will happen. But I think a double pivot would be better just to make sure that you have cover in front of this back four because we're too open. Marco says Jesus has to start. It's one of those where we live or die by his boots. He has to show up on Wednesday, no hiding from it. Benching him to me is not an option. Of course not. I think obviously Arteta is going to start Jesus. Like I already said, I think the same team will start. But from my perspective, like Jesus hasn't showed the composure in the difficult moments that I would like. And I think Trossard has shown those. But Jesus will start and he has a lot to show because like after the match against Southampton, I thought he sounded like he had conceded already in terms of the title. Like basically like, well, we just don't have, the experience, the champions experience. So there you go. And it's just kind of like, that's not really what you want to hear from one of the guys that are supposed to be leading the charge. Like, you want to hear we haven't done good enough, but we still have a chance, we're going to go to the Etihad and give it our all. We're going to do this and that. And so I think like I need players that feel like we can go to the Etihad and win the fucking game and not that we just don't have the experience. So fuck it, but I'm a little bit disappointed in Jesus right now. So it may just be a little bit of like, me just not feeling him right now. Kafunso says Arteta got to manage his tactics in stages, not just a later part of the game. And it may be just like telling the team that they need to get through 15 minutes at a time, don't overthink everything, it might just be that, every 15 minutes, just kind of like, okay, we got to the next step. It's really a shame that I feel like at this stage of the season and this stage of our progression that we have no chance of like competing with them. And that's what it feels like people are saying and how we feel. But as the team leading the Premier League, if we can't give them a good game, that's really, really bad. Crispy says, can we please hire a set piece defense coach? We are low-key shambolic at defending them. I would just say Nicholas Jover just needs to do a better job. I don't think he needs to be sacked again. Last season, we gave up like no goals. So I think it's a matter of, maybe the players aren't grasping, the information, or maybe he's changed something and he needs to fix it. But I wouldn't sack him. But yeah, we need to do much better. Yo-Yo says, try to break up the game like they did versus Liverpool feels defeatist. Yeah. We just kind of need to like, I can't believe at this point we don't feel like we can actually compete with them on the day. We were never the best team in the league at any point if we go to the Etihad and we just pull our pants down. Like there's just no way. Carl Grant says, we shall see Wednesday. Hopefully he starts and don't bash him if he messes up. Um, who? Um, the thing about it is in games like this, like you either performed or you didn't. And so if Jesus is in front of the goal and he misses a sitter, he's going to get pelters for it. And I think, you know, if he's as good as we think he is, then we should expect him to put the ball in the back of the net. We don't have to tell him that, you know, we don't have to abuse him or anything like that. But if you think that he's, you know, going into this important game, he doesn't deliver, that people are just going to let it go, you got another thing coming. Simon Bond says, just these players in Arteta earn a lot of dough and must deliver. They all must grow quickly and leave their hopes for a pat on the back at home. Oh, about Jorginho. I mean, yeah, like I would play Jorginho in this game. I think experience is important when you're going into really big games, you know, that are like penultimate games, like, you know, and Jorginho and Tierney are two players for me that, like, when you look at it, like, are more calm most of the time and have been in big games where they've come out on the victorious side. And so, you know, Xhaka, although he's a great player and he's played well this season, he won't get dropped, and I know that. But I almost wish that Arteta was not so wedded to some of these players where he would think about different things, because like Xhaka as an advanced midfielder against Diaz and fucking Akanji, he's not going to get a sniff, you know? So what's the point? Like, you know, you know, Sakshem says if he misses chances, it's his fault. That's what it's like playing against big teams or playing for big teams. Kaza says, I don't think Jorginho has the legs for City's midfield. Our midfield would get overrun. I just don't think it's going to be like this big track meet. I think they're going to be pretty much at the halfway line and we're going to be a little bit further back trying to defend and counter. And so for that reason, that's why I don't think it's necessarily about legs in midfield. I think we need to remain compact. And then when we have the chance to actually attack, we need somebody at the base of midfield that can hit those balls into the channels correctly into Martinelli and Bukayo Saka. For me, that's maybe not Granit Xhaka so much. It's more of a Jorginho thing, and he can replace the need for Zinchenko at the base of midfield. But if you guys think Xhaka can do it, Xhaka can do it. But what he cannot be is advanced. He needs to be a little bit deeper, I think. So yeah. Let's see. Boy says mad at lineup. Ramsdale, White, Saliba, or I'm sorry, Saka, Kivior, Magalhaes, Zinchenko, Partey, Odegaard, Trossard, Martinelli, and Jesus right wing. Yeah, I hear that. The only thing is just like, you know, I don't know. That definitely does seem like a galaxy brain one, but I hear you're trying to get like all of our attackers out there at once. I thought about that too. Like, how do you get Trossard on the pitch? Because, you know, when we get chances to attack, we have to take them. We can't, like, we may only get one or two chances. And like, to me, like maybe one of our most composed players in the box is probably Trossard, and not to have him on the pitch just feel criminal, you know? House of King says, Jess, we have to go full attack, 15 minutes, try them. If we get a goal, then defend first half, secure it. Second half, we can capitalize on Rodri. If Odegaard can cause some trouble, we need central balls. Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, we need to go attack, you know, and I don't think we should just sit back and like have no out ball or anything like that. But we need to attack when we could. It's so bad that I feel like we can't, like, maybe this is just me maybe feeling like, you know, how the fan base feels, but like we should feel like we could play against them. You know, I know that they're so good and like they've went up a level, but like Arsenal should be able to meet them in some way, you know? It's such a shame. but it's going to be so important to plug those gaps. Obviously Holland is probably going to be like, yes, Holding is back here, and like they'll try to get him on an early yellow. Hopefully Holding, again, his emotions don't get the better of him and he doesn't, I think my thing is like, don't give away the red or the penalty. Just try to stay on the pitch, because then we have options after that. It's just so many things to worry about, I think. And it's such a shame that they're going into like a good trajectory towards the end and we're kind of going down a little bit. It sucks. Best Game says, Jess, you have never rated Xhaka, but I have seen a good game we have played without Xhaka, but I have never seen a good game we have played without Xhaka. Have you forgotten that in the home game against City, Xhaka ran through goal and was inches away? Yeah, so I haven't really rated Xhaka, so that's definitely true, but I've given him his flowers this season. I always feel like we need to upgrade upon him, and I don't feel bad for saying it. Just because you haven't played a good game without the player doesn't mean that there's not another solution. And that's because usually the player that's playing in his position is like Vieira, and Vieira hasn't been good in these last couple of games, when he's come in for Granit Xhaka. So, I'm not saying replace Granit Xhaka with Vieira. I'm saying replace Granit Xhaka with Jorginho. But I get why Arteta doesn't do it, because he wants to keep those same automatisms and he feels like Xhaka is the best option, and maybe he is, but Xhaka is going to have a monster game. Like he can't just get, lost in the game and not have any influence on it. And I find that against bigger teams, like against the better teams, when it comes down to it, our midfield doesn't usually stand up against them. Like I thought Liverpool's midfield at the end of the first half and all of the second half absolutely dominated them. And I find Xhaka, like he was okay, but he's limited. And so just trying to figure out what else we could do, but that's not to say that I think Xhaka hasn't had a great season. Crispy says, I'm actually super excited. Do you think I had learned my lesson after losing at the Etihad so much? It's 11 losses in a row. So it's pretty poor. And that's my thing about, as poor of teams as we've had, I don't think we've ever had, our teams have been so poor that we should just accept 11 losses in a row. Other teams have been able to beat them, not regularly, but at least gotten draws and stuff like that. And for me, that's why it's more of a mentality thing than anything. And so if Arsenal go in there with a poor mentality, they will get whooped. But if they go in there confident with a good game plan and they're ready to compete, and then the tactics are on point, we can make it a competitive game. And a team that is top of the league playing against number 2 should not be getting blown away. That would really call into question the validity of our season. And even though people are telling me we've so outperformed our XG and all that kind of stuff, I still am thinking that like we probably should be, in and around the top despite that, because like even, I just, nah, it's just a no for me. I think that's a cop out as well. Oh, we overperformed our XG, so that means that we were never really as good. Like, no, we're looking for reasons for it to be okay not to compete. Simon says, but Jess, where do you get this invisible motivation, Arsenal, in the last few minutes? Why not all the time or when it matters most? Well, this is when it matters most. This is the most difficult part of the season. And right before Manchester City, I am saying that we need to back the team and have a little bit of confidence. I already said at the beginning of this is I'm not saying that I'm not culpable for fading in and out of confidence like everybody else, but I'm really questioning that now, because I don't think it shows a good mentality for the fan base to not back the team in the position that we're at and to completely back away from the title race now. When we lost to Manchester City at home, the main reason why I was really like, distraught after that game was, one, because I thought we were better than that. And I actually respect our team enough to say that we should have done better. There were too many Arsenal fans what really pissed me off is after Manchester City at home, there were so many people that were saying, that's basically as good as we could have done. Like, it's fine. Like, we passed well and we were kind of dominant in the first half, but then, we just made individual mistakes and it's fine. Well, no, because for the title race, we needed to at least beat them one time. And so to lose at home, knowing that we had to go to the Etihad, for me was way more like I thought the reaction should have been a lot more than what it was, especially because that team should not have been getting slapped 3-1. It just shouldn't, you know? So people may take my criticism of the team as me not believing in them or whatever, but I actually think making excuses like, oh, we don't have Saliba, so there's no chance. We overperformed our XG, we're not as good, and we're about to go to the Etihad and completely saying we have no chance is actually more disrespectful to the team than me being critical. I actually think the team is really good, and I think they had the chance or have the chance to win the league. So no, I'm not always 100%, but you talk about why not always and why not when it matters. This is when it matters. We're about to go to Manchester City, and I'm not seeing a lot of people in the comment section saying anything like what I'm saying. So yeah, I get that people, no, it's Jessica, she's so negative, she's so this and that. Sometimes you guys take my negativity wrong. It's because I actually think we should expect more from this team because they're better than what they're showing. Like, they can do it. We should expect more. Yo-Yo says, we've lost our safety net all season. We've been walking a tightrope now. It's time to do or die. Yeah, we lost our safety net. We should have definitely been beating, Southampton and West Ham. But, now they've made it more difficult for themselves, Logic says, Holding needs to be benched. He's better as a sub for 10 minutes starting. He's a shambles. It's weird because he's probably performing to the best of his ability, but if this is the best of his ability, like, that's the issue, Saksham says, we dropped stupid points against Everton, Brentford, Southampton, etc. That will cost us more than a draw at Anfield and West Ham. Yeah. Potentially. I mean, I think Brentford are a really good team, I actually think, maybe it was, Everton and Southampton. West Ham, I think we should have been beating, really, because Brentford are actually a better team, but I hear what you're saying. Lucas says, is it the first game of the season where we are underdogs? Even City at home, we were expected to get something. Yeah, I mean, City at home, we effed that up. I thought that was not catastrophe, but the response of some Arsenal fans was just like, well, we tried, we passed, we were, good, we were this and that. We're beyond that. Like, we need to be getting results at home against City, and they kind of, for me, it was boys against men. I just thought they looked composed and confident and calm. And when we had a little bit of pressure on us, we caved and we couldn't rebound from it. And then we just shat the bed and had the individual errors, right? And so we should have gotten something at home. And had we gotten that, we wouldn't be under so much pressure to have to go to the Etihad and beat them. Because again, I was looking a little bit further ahead and I'm like, we have City, we have to go to Anfield, we have to go to City, and we have to go to St. James. Those are going to be very difficult games. So if we could get something now, we'll probably be in a good position, and we didn't. So yeah, we should be expecting more from this team, but I think we should expect a little bit more from this team. But who knows? We've been outperforming our XG, so we're never really good enough. Blaze says, Jess, do you agree with Gary Neville about some experienced players didn't step up against Southampton, but young players was more calm? Absolutely. I think he was spot on with that. And I don't like to say that he was spot on with anything, but I'll just say this, like, I don't think we've gotten anywhere near what we should. I know my hair looks a mess, you guys. It's one of them days. Don't take it personal. But I don't think we've seen anywhere near enough from Thomas Partey, Zinchenko, and Jesus for me from a leadership standpoint in these last couple of games. I think they've been the most rattled, the most, inconsistent. And, and it's unfortunate, and I was, we were having this debate the other day about like who our most important players are. And our best players. It was like who are Arsenal's best players, and somebody was saying like it's Zinchenko and Jesus, and I was like, it's actually not. Like our best players are Gabriel Martinelli and Bukayo Saka. You know, like, and then probably third is Odegaard. Your best players are the ones that have the most talent and they're the most consistent. It's those two together equal the best. You can't just have the talent, you have to be consistent. And you can't just be consistent, you have to have the talent. And for me, Martinelli and Saka have been the most consistent players, and they're two of our most talented. They show up when it matters. And so for me, like in the beginning of the season, I did kind of think it might have been Jesus and Zinchenko, like because they're probably technically our best players, but they've been nowhere near the level of consistency, that, 26, 27-year-olds should have, especially we're getting down the stretch and I still see Martinelli and Saka doing the work and Odegaard as well, so yeah. The older players, like they should be one in the media speaking about Arsenal as if they can win the game. That was a huge mistake from Jesus, in my opinion. Two, they should be getting the players ready to go to the Etihad and go to war. And three, when we start the game, they should be the ones leading from the jump, But again, it's another season, I feel like, of Saka and Martinelli in general carrying us, and that's a problem, Blaze says Gabriel also most consistent in the season. Yeah, Gabriel for me is one of our most consistent players. Again, like consistency and best, the talent aspect of things. I think Gabriel's very talented, but I think he's just like on the level below them. Gabriel's been very consistent. And he's been very good this season. More consistent than Saliba, but Saliba's probably more talented, so they even each other out. I think Ben White also kind of falls in that category of probably most talented plus most consistent. It's definitely a player that I think could play for us at the highest level. I think he's shown that he doesn't get that flustered. I think the only games where I thought, ooh, not so great, were probably Manchester United at home, maybe Liverpool away. But for the most part, he's been up there with our best performers. I think also Trossard, he's only been here for a short amount of time, but he's another player that I think could be playing at the top level for Arsenal. Composure, talent, consistency. It's been a short period of time, but he has that for me. And then Odegaard as well. I think he's right on the cusp of that as well. If he could just add the big game clutch gene thing, like he needs to get that. I think Saka and Martinelli are just a little bit ahead of him in terms of the big games away from home against the big team. Like he has to be a little bit more present in those games. But I think for the most part, like he's right about there. And then there's huge question marks around everybody else for me, and there just is, based on this season. We still need more signings, and we need personality more than anything. Boy says, we are the Arsenal. We should be aiming to win every single game. Exactly. Blaze says, yeah, Gabrielle. Chris says, where would we be without Odegaard, Saka, and Martinelli this season? Kind of scary. I put them in like a different category to everybody else. I just feel like their performances this season they've led us. They've carried us, they've led us. There's been some other, great performers, but I think when you think about our attacking performances versus our defensive performances, like you could see the difference there. And they're our most important players. Like they just, I know they're going to go, especially like Saka and Martinelli. I know they're going to go to the Etihad and give it. I know they are. Everybody else, we're just going to have to fucking see. We're just going to have to see. Bioyo says, people need to look at the form Liverpool, West Ham, Southampton were in before Arsenal played them. We rejuvenated, revived, and resuscitated their seasons. I thought about that as well. One of the biggest one of the biggest like red flags for me was that Liverpool's midfield, who have been catastrophic the entire season, Declan Rice and Romeo Lavia, all had their best games of the season against us. Our midfield was getting worked in all three games. And I know we've said it a million times, but I'll say it again. Arsenal have got to they have to buy 2 midfielders in the summer. It's well overdue. It's not enough to just do it, when we're playing against the booty teams, like in the summertime when the sun is shining. Like, I need you to do it when it matters, and players should not be having their games of the season against us in our home ground. That was a very embarrassing situation for me, for Thomas Partey. I don't know how he looked himself in the mirror the day after, because I'm just like, not only did Declan Rice absolutely destroy you at the London Stadium, but then you turned around and let an 18-year-old outplay you at home. We need midfielders, and we need them badly. We need more we just need better midfielders that have personality, and they just no fear. Saksham says we don't press aggressively like we did before. That's due to holding for sure. Yeah, we don't press anywhere near what we were doing at the beginning of the season. Boy says our midfield is not as good as the season would have us believe. It's that simple. Only Odegaard stays out of the lot of them. I think that's, to me, that's obvious, but it's hard because although I do think Xhaka and Partey have had good seasons, I do see a limit to how good we can be with them. And we need to be ruthless. Chris says, in my opinion, we need to build the future of our team around Saka, Martinelli, Odegaard, White, Gabriel, and Saliba. Everyone else is completely expendable. Respect to Trossard, though. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think these are the players, the ones that you've listed, that for me are the players that are here to stay, and are going to be like the players that we're seeing in the Champions League for us, like next season, whatever. Everybody else, for me, there's question marks around because of how the season has panned out. As good as Jesus and Zinchenko have been, they have limitations, and that's why they're not at City, so they've definitely lifted our game, and they're very technical and great players, but you can see why they're not at City, and they're exactly how they've been advertised to us. And so do I think that should be the end for us? No, I think eventually we'll get the striker that everybody is looking for. And so Jesus won't be starting for us forever. And Zinchenko, I think next season, if Tomiyasu was fit, I'd play Tomiyasu more. I like when we play the big back four and we play where we really shut them down. I like that more sometimes than having him come into midfield and dictating all play, because eventually, it will become so predictable that people will start to really be able to stop it. So yeah, I think, I 100% agree with that list. I think those are the guys that we build the future around, for sure. I also put Ramsdale in there, but I know some people are not so high on him, but I think Ramsdale is fine. I think he's actually going to be really good for us. Bendover says Ramsdale, he ain't leaving. I agree. And then Lionide saying Rodri will man mark Odegaard. And that's the issue, is once Odegaard is marked out of the game by Rodri, who's going to step up and take the responsibility of controlling the game? Odegaard controls the game for us. That's what he does. He's always heavy touches, always in, if he doesn't get the ball, then that pretty much cuts off the supply line to Saka, and then we're in trouble. And so that means that you have Xhaka, in there. And I don't necessarily feel like he's a great controller. I don't think he's somebody that has the creativity. And that's where the issue comes in. That's why we need another midfielder. That's for me exactly why Xhaka needs to be moved on. It's not because he hasn't had a great season. It's because if Odegaard is man marked, the player that's not being man marked has got to step up and be able to do things. And I don't think he can do that. So yeah. Graham Yates says Gabriel will become a squad player at best going forward. I hardly think that he'll become a squad player, after the season that he's had. I highly doubt that, but I get some people are still holding on to their dislike of Gabriel because he made a mistake here or there. Yo-Yo says, I'm frustrated with Arteta that he has never tried Tommy at fullback and Zinni in the 8. Been waiting for years for this midfield to be properly addressed post Santi. There's something about Zinchenko that I don't think we'll ever see him in midfield. I don't know what it is, but I don't know. Like, there's something there. Like, Arteta has Zinchenko as a midfield option. He had, like, before we bought Fabio Vieira, like, we would have known that, Zinchenko can play midfield and there's Tierney and Tommy, so it's a little strange to me that, like, we haven't seen it, and I think that's because we never will. Those are my thoughts, so there's that. But if Tomiyasu was fit, I would play him at left back all the time. I play him so much more because I think one of our better games was against, like, to be able to go toe to toe with Liverpool, you have to have that. You have to be athletic, physical, able to withstand, challenge. I think if Zinchenko had been back there, we would have lost. I think Tomiyasu was so good in that game, and I would play Tomiyasu more. I really would. Harry says our team is solid. If we add Rice and Caicedo, it would be great for 4 or 5 years. I don't know about Caicedo coming to Arsenal just because I'm not sure that they're going to sell him and McAllister, especially if they get into Europe. But 2 midfielders have to come in regardless. And, also Zinchenko, I think he's more of a league player than a European player. I thought every time he played in Europe for us, he looked suspect. And that's because the games tend to be more stretched. They're a little bit more physical. You tend to have to go up and back a little bit more. And so transition is really important. And so if you're not going to keep the game tight and be sitting at the halfway line playing possession football, you have to play somebody other than Zinchenko. So there has to be something else, there. But, do you think having such a long period of rest makes them think more about the title and their mistake compared to City, where they're playing every 3 days? I don't know. I think it's just once we got to a point where that City game was being talked about a lot, then we started to falter. Just like earlier on in the season, as soon as that City game was in sight, we started to fluff our lines in the games right before. But I do think that, like, our team doesn't play as well when they don't have a game every 3 days. I do think that we need that constant, playing. I also think our levels have dropped since we went out of Europa League and we have no other cup games. Whoever said that 1 game a week was, like, so good, I don't know. I don't think it is. But yeah. Let's see. And Bendover, I said, if Tommy was fit more, I would play Tomiyasu more, so obviously that is saying that, like, he has to be fit, but if he was fit, I would play him more. I think that kind of speaks for itself. So yeah, but what does B-Doc says? Blaze, I'm a City fan, been watching the bloke for years. He can't defend for his life, and you want to put him in midfield 3. You're deluded. Okay, so I don't know anything about that. I think there's a reason why Arteta hasn't played him in midfield, so there you go. But we've been doing this for 2 hours, and so it wasn't really like a preview that we would usually do, but I don't even think we need to do like a full-on City preview where we go through key players and stuff like that. Saliba is not going to be there. Holding will most likely play. You guys know my thoughts on the feeling around the fan base. If that is going into the dressing room, then we're effed, because at this point, even if it looks unlikely, Arsenal Football Club should be going into that game against Manchester City and looking at it as a cup final and not going into it as if the season is already over. And I'm very alarmed, by just our general, like, season's done, thing. And that comes from me as well, because I have that feeling. And so as a fan base, I think our mentality needs some work, but I understand that we haven't been in this position very often and maybe it'll take time, but maybe next time we're in a title race, we won't give up 6 games before the season is done, So yeah, make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel. Obviously the game on Wednesday, we'll see what happens there. And tomorrow I'll probably come back and we'll chit chat a little bit more, but until then, I'll see you guys later. Bye guys.